Busy day. So welcome everybody. I'm David Abrahams. I'm the current director of the Isaac Newton Institute for Mathematical Sciences. It's a really great pleasure for me to welcome you all, the new revamped correspondence. And we took an executive decision to make the correspondence for the ICMS, the International Centre for Mathematical Sciences, as well as I&I, because we see ourselves as representing the infrastructure for mathematical sciences in the UK. And our role is to serve you, the community, and so we have to reach out and try and make sure that we are putting on the right sorts of activities for all the universities in the UK. But of course we're international institutions, so we have to have the right balance between overseas representation, subject areas, as well as getting plenty of home inclusion, buy-in from everyone in the universities. And of course we're supported by the research councils, so we have to make sure we do what they want as well as what we want to do. Here's a quick schedule for the afternoon, and we're deliberately not going to be navel-gazing and talking about the roles and responsibilities of the correspondents. I will say one slide very quickly about what your role and what responsibilities are, and then we will get on to some key things which we think are important. And the two things that Paul Glendinning and I feel are very important are just seeing how the landscape lies for EPSRC, our main funders, with the changeover to UKRI. So very kindly, Andrew Bourne from EPSRC has agreed to come and talk to us for that, so that will be in a few minutes. And then after that, we felt what is one of the most pressing matters that we should be involved with in the community, and it's getting the diversity, equality and inclusivity right for our community. We've got a huge way to go before we can actually say that we're doing a decent job. And how we as the two centres for the mathematical sciences in the UK can do that is really important, and we want to hear what you think about it. So Liz Mansfield from Kent and the Vice President of the IMA has very kindly agreed to lead on that, and there'll be a breakout session where we want your input to it. Okay, so we really should say a couple of things about what the I&I and the ICMS do in case there's new correspondents and haven't seen us in action. So we will run through that very quickly, and hopefully we'll stop at one, and then Andrew Bourne can take over. But before I do that, I should just introduce a few people. So Paul Glendinning, to those people who don't, he's going to talk for a few minutes about ICMS. He's the scientific director of ICMS. The centre manager of ICMS is Jane Walker, who's here, and if anyone wants to talk to her or Paul about activities, then please grab them at the wine reception. Can I introduce Katie Blaney, who's our new theme leader for mathematical sciences for EPSRC. She's taken over from Philippa Hemmings, and thank you. We look forward to working with you, Katie, in over the next few years. We should also say thanks to Philippa Hemmings. She's been meticulous in her dealings with the community, and Paul and I have had a very pleasant dance over the last 18 months while we're trying to renegotiate our contracts with EPSRC. So Philippa has been an enormous input and has had an effect on our community, and all of those in the mathematical sciences theme. So I think we have to acknowledge our gratitude to them. And Andrew, you'll come on board soon. So I think we'll wait to show you off. And then the last is Christy Marr, who's the deputy director of the I&I. So Christy knows far more about the I&I over the past, because I'm still a new boy in the role. And I should say the end is Samantha Scahill, who's the administrator for the I&I. If you just smile there, that's her. So again, the logistics of everything in this building are down to Samantha and to Christy. Okay, so very quickly, correspondence were established in 2002 by what was then called the National Advisory Board. It was felt that the I&I needed to look more outwardly, so they came up with this advisory board of great and good individuals who then said, well, we're not doing very much. It's much better if you have correspondence people who really are grounded within their departments, who can interact and we can have a good discussion about what we're doing. So they created the correspondence and then they disbanded themselves. So the National Advisory Board came and went, and then the basic remit is to act as a communication channel. So you should be regularly informed by us, by bulletins, emails, and more social media, etc., about what's going on here. And then you should ensure that dissemination of that material within your organisation or to whoever you think is appropriate. And then feed back to us your thoughts on what our overall programming strategy is like. And then one of the specific things we do here is we have lots of participants, long-term participants. They like to go and give seminars elsewhere, and we want you to think about our list of visitors and see who you want and who's relevant to your department and invite them. So we pay all the costs for that. And the same is true at ICMF for their visitors. You know, Terry Towers over there last summer, and if you knew in advance, you maybe have got him to give a seminar for you. Okay, I'll just talk for a few seconds about the Newton Institute, and then Paul will do the same for ICMS. So this is the building. And what is it that we do? Well, rather than talk process, just take some feedback. Basically, people come here, they interact in ways that they maybe haven't done mechanisms since they were PhD students, with time, space, environment to prosecute their research, and with wonderful colleagues who have come from all over the world to enjoy that same bit of serene time away from their lecture loads and all the administrative burden. And our reputation is good, our track record is excellent, and we believe those sum up really what it is that we try and do. It changes lives of the individuals who are here and moves disciplines forward. So I&I was opened in 1992, so this is its 25th anniversary year, and this is the same building, largely unchanged. So it's coming to the end of its sort of life. It's done well to survive for 25 years, but we have many more people than we used to. So we have ambitious plans in train to extend the space, but we need money to do that. So if you know any generous donors, then we're always looking for a few £1 million here and there. But the penultimate bullet point is very important, that we've been going through this process of renewing our grant alongside ICMS, and we've been assured funding for the next 6 years. So it gives us great stability to really plan our program, a schedule, and to get those activities which are really timely and important for us to pursue for the furtherance of UK mathematical sciences in the very broadest sense. We haven't actually been told the precise figure, but I think Paul is in the fortunate position of his being known now. So just to give you some sense of scale of activity and how it's grown, we've run about 135 research programs over 25 years. Those programs are largely 4 or 6 months in duration, although we have quite a few 1-month programs. The participant lists are just about, you know, the great and the good in mathematical sciences. It's a fantastic privilege to be here and to see this in action. Roughly the participation balance is a third from the UK, a third from Europe, and a third from the rest of the world. That just sort of happens. And then looking at our figures for last year, program participant days, so those people invited to be on these long-term programs, about 20,000, 7,000 workshop participants, and that translates, if you add on other one-day meetings, to about 2,500 individuals coming through our building, which is a lot of people. And so we reach a huge audience. So if you scale that up over 5 or 10 years, you see that we really can have a large impact in the international community, and we need you to help us make sure that the impact of those people is not all exported for papers for UCLA and Harvard, but it's for UK research and knowledge exchange. Here's a few research topics researched at the I&I. And we were trying to run 3 programs in parallel over the last 18 months as a trial to see, A, if we can do it, physically with the administrative load, B, have we got enough space in our building to do it, and third, have we enough money to do it, because it's more costly. So that's why I've grouped them into 3s, and so we're looking at that. Money-wise, it's a bit tight, but the biggest constraint is space in our building. And I realise time is pressing, but you can find all of the information about our programming. But if you look here, it goes from forensic science to homology theory, etc. So it covers the whole spectrum of the very pure to the very applied. And the last couple of slides I just want to say, you may know what's going on the I&I side, but on the knowledge exchange side of what we do, we created in 2013 something called the Turing Gateway to Mathematics, which is a separate entity living within the I&I, which is to facilitate knowledge exchange between mathematicians and people outside in academia, but also interdisciplinary between different communications in science. And there's an example of the sorts of things that we do. They ran 20 events, which are largely events from 1 day to 3 days. And basically, I've just put down here the role of I&I and TGM, but at the bottom, there's a number of drivers at the moment. The bottom one is the transformation of RCUK to UKRI, which will be tackled later. And I've overdone it, so I'll pass on to Paul now, who will say a bit about ICMS.
Thanks, Dave. And for those of you that know me, I'm Paul Glendinning from the University of Manchester. One of the things ICMS has is an independent, as it were, scientific director, someone not actually at the University of Edinburgh or Heriot-Watt. And can I also echo a welcome to Katie Blaney. It's the first, I think, big maths meeting that she's been part of, and it's a pleasure to have Andrew Bourne here as well to talk about the landscape. So thank you for coming. I would also echo David in saying that the 2 things that are important today is this change from EPSRC to UKRI and the opportunities that come from that. The second is the issue of diversity, and I think really all you have to do is look around this room to realise that there's a problem. I'm not going to say anything more about that, but you can't spot that there is a problem, you can't add up. So ICMS is in Edinburgh, that's in Scotland, so you've heard that. And we're in the heart of the city, so it's a great place to visit. People enjoy being with us, and they do a lot of mathematics, and we're moving into a new building, topped with great big views over Arthur's Seat and things like that, which is going to be fantastic. So who comes to ICMS? Well, we take the international part of our title very, very seriously. We've got 50% that are not UK based. We've got 40% who are early career researchers. So it's a real mix. In terms of diversity, it's not fantastic, but it's not dreadful. 22% of the speakers are women, same proportion as the participants, that's the 2017 numbers. Not hugely proud of that, I'd like that to be higher. We had over the last 3 years 47 UK universities, so that's, I think that only 52 universities put in the MAPS RAE, that's not a bad reach. And I think the important thing is, just as in the Newton, we've got Fields medalists, we've also got postgraduate students, and I think this element of sort of having this real mix of people and training and learning and talking with each other is really important. There's a busy slide. Outside on the tables there's actually a sheet about the opportunities for funding through EPSRC at ICMS. But basically, we do workshops. We do concentrated research workshops, about 1 week in duration, and they've got to be focused. The whole point is to do stuff, okay? Not to just say, oh, I did this 2 years ago. Okay, so what we're looking for is things that will advance ideas and actually do mathematics. We also have small researching groups and research partnerships with industry. These allow international collaborations to happen, bring a group of researchers to Edinburgh for 2 weeks or so to actually try to finish a paper or to start a paper. And again, I think the international dimension of that is really important, particularly with the Royal Society removing the international travel grants a few years ago. We got good both the Newton Institute and ourselves got good marks from the infrastructure review, and I think it's just excellence in people. I'm not going to go on and on. We do some industrial mathematics. We have just started strategic workshops, and I think that's to tie in with opportunities in the changing funding landscape. So one of the main drivers there is either something's got to be absolutely necessary now, or it's got to be enabling the mathematics community to interact in a broader setting. And that includes things like the Global Challenges Research Fund and just thinking about the future, I think one of the things that we're working on, which is very boring but needs to be done, is things like governance and transparency. And actually, again, I think that ties in incredibly with the diversity issue. Okay, there's a real danger that you sort of set you have a few men sitting around the table saying, "Oh, who shall we invite next?" And that is not a good mechanism. I'm not saying that we did that, but we weren't that far away from it. And one of the things we're very keen to do, and which is also part of the strategic aims at the moment, is to broaden funding streams. So that the Newton Institute has been very good at working with other parts of RCUK, and that's something that we're very keen at ICMS, that we get more of that funding from other streams. So I think, just to sum up, which is exactly what David said, we are an opportunity. Both the Newton Institute and ICMS are an opportunity for the community. And what we'd like you to do is to get that message through to people in your departments, that if they have ideas, if there are things they want to do, if there are people that they want to bring through, then there is space and funding to do that at ICMS and the Newton. The other thing is, what else should we be doing? Okay, so if people have ideas of things that are glaringly obvious to them, that are not on our sort of list of things that we cater for, that we enable, then please let us know. I can't say I can click a finger and make that happen, but the more ideas one has, the greater flexibility of thought, then clearly we're going to get things done better. So, that's all I want to say. And it's time that we're going to move straight on to the first main part of this talk for the next hour and a bit. And it's a pleasure to have Andrew Bourne here from EPSRC. He's Associate Director of EPSRC, and in particular in charge of strategic issues around connections with universities and things like that, and delivery of that. Now, I'm not going to, Andrew knows much better than I do what he does, and so I'm going to allow him to explain it and to tell you really about the landscape of the mathematical landscape that EPSRC sees coming over there.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Are we on, or is it?
No, well, put your hand up if you can't hear me. Oh, do I need a microphone? Is that okay?
It might be useful to have it for live streaming.
Okay,
if
I
you
can
don't
do
mind.
that, not a problem. Am I on? Red line? Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Christine, for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you this afternoon. So, as I said, I'm Andrew Bourne. I've worked at EPSRC a number of years, have hopefully lots of different experiences that have helped me in my role today. So I've previously looked after the physical sciences theme, so hopefully I have a good understanding of some of the kind of fundamental science research issues facing the research community. I've looked after postgraduate training. I've managed, along with David Wallace, the eScience programme, and as I say, currently I look after our strategic relationships with universities, but I also look after some relationships with some companies, and probably more of my role now is developing our strategy for our delivery plan and a science strategy as we go forward. So very mixed portfolio and set of experiences. So this afternoon I've got hopefully something for everyone. So in terms of what I'm going to cover will be a beginning about the current transfer to UKRI and some of the kind of funding opportunities that have arisen from that. Then I'll talk about EPSRC's delivery plan. Why wouldn't I? Because that's something I know very strongly about. And then we'll lead that into a bit more focus on mathematical sciences. It would be very remiss of me if I didn't cover Centres for Doctoral Training, and then I've just got a couple of updates on the review of knowledge exchange for mathematical sciences. So quite a broad portfolio. So it's quite a lot to cover. So if I go over anything quite quickly and you want to follow it up, I'm around for the rest of the afternoon, here for the reception this evening, so I haven't got to rush off, so happy to sort of take more informal questions afterwards if that helps with the timing. Okay. So, biggest change I think for research councils in 25 years or more, probably nearer 30. Following Sir Paul Nurse's review, there's a recommendation to form a new organisation called UK Research and Innovation. One of the main benefits is to bring greater strategic vision for UK science, give us more of a stronger voice, particularly when working with government. EPSRC had quite a reasonable sized budget, but some of the other research councils had smaller budgets, so it gives us that more collective power. I think it's some of the work that we do with BAYS and our government departments can take up quite a lot of time, and so I think one of the benefits of this kind of simplified organisation is a sharper interaction with our government masters to create more space for the research councils to get on and manage their science communities, and there'll obviously be some back office harmonisations as well. I think EPSRC is in a really good place. We've done quite a lot of harmonising with some of our other sister research councils already, so hopefully our journey isn't as far as perhaps some others have to go. A key focus of Sir Paul Nurse's review was of this kind of thorny issue of interdisciplinarity and how it looks and feels. I think we have a lot of experience working and supporting interdisciplinary research, but it doesn't feel like that, I think, for people on the ground. So clearly either we're not, our structures aren't simple enough for that to work well, or we need to do more to support peer review to get us through that as well. And improved decision making and policy in decisions, both policy for science and for other national policy decisions where science has an important role to play. So this is what it's looking like. For those that perhaps aren't aware, it's not only the 7 research councils coming together, but also Innovate UK and a new organisation called Research England. That's the kind of core funding part of HEFCE, which is the rest of that's becoming the Office for Students. But certainly we're still working very closely with the devolved administrations of the Scottish Funding Council, HEFCWA and the Northern Ireland Executive. And it's created on the 1st of April this year. And collectively around £6 billion of funding will be coming into this organisation, so quite a fair-sized organisation that will be. So the board's now been appointed. You'll have heard in the last week Sir Chong Kingman has been confirmed as the permanent chair of UKRI. And this is our first mission statement. I'm sure it will evolve over time as the organisation becomes established, but it aims to be an outstanding organisation for supporting research and innovation. We've got 3 pillars, and I think EPSRC is very well placed in all of these aspects. So one is about knowledge and pushing the frontiers of knowledge forward. Secondly, it's about delivering economic impact for the nation that's obviously supporting this organisation and creating jobs. And thirdly, it's about creating societal impact and making lives better for all. Now, for those that have been in the funding system, you'll know it's been quite challenging for the last probably 10 or 15 years in terms of the funding landscape. We've had flat cash settlements. Funding for science has been pretty level for even before that. And so we're now, I think, in the realms of about 1.6% of funding for research and development as a percentage of GDP being 1.67%. And it would have been falling further, but I think as part of the creation and extra cash injection that's happened recently and announced by the Chancellor in the 2016 autumn statement, is it's now going to be stabilised, and so hopefully, whilst we've been getting flat cash settlements, the impact of inflation, certainly for EPSRC, I can't speak for all research councils, has effectively meant a 17% cut in real terms if you take into account sort of scientific inflation, the cost of living going up, and supporting the various infrastructures and international subscriptions that we have. So the recent uplift in the autumn statement has kind of brought a halt to that drop, which is really very welcomed news indeed. So there's an additional 4.7 billion of funding over that funding period, which of course is coming in gradually over the next sort of successive years. But what it will mean is for the total budget an uplift of an extra £2 billion a year in the final year for science. So that's a really significant increase for what we're used to. So this is kind of putting us into the international context, showing where we currently sit in terms of our contribution for GDP. So here's the OECD average of 2.4%, and this is the United Kingdom at 1.7%. So recently the government has made a commitment by 2027 to reach 2.4% of GDP, to bring us up to the OECD average, and a further commitment to get to 3% over a longer period. No set time frames for that decision, but certainly they're going to be working with UKRI to set out an action plan to actually set goals to achieve that. So that £4.7 billion of additional investment has been framed as the National Productivity Investment Fund. And there are various different elements to that. So the one that you've probably heard most about if you've been following kind of science policy is the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. But there are also plans for increased funding for research capacity. There are some being science innovation audits that have been supported. I think a third wave have been supported. And increasingly for university funding to improve collaboration, technology transfer, and working with industry. So I think that was going to come through the old kind of QR Research England sort of stream as well. But these three kind of blocks here haven't been defined yet, so that most work has been done on the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. So for the white paper, so there's the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund and there's the Industrial Strategy. There was a consultation, certainly research councils and many stakeholders input to that strategy, which was finally published in November 2017. And in this strategy there was a further additional £725 million to be delivered through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, supporting further waves of investment. And also, very encouragingly, £300 million investment over the next 3 years for supporting research and innovation talent. So that's primarily an uplift to the number of PhDs that we support, and also knowledge transfer partnerships, which I think are more in Innovate UK space, but we do co-fund many of those as well. And there's also work to develop a strategic priorities fund. So I think if you think, and I'll say a bit more about the industrial strategy, the current thinking is that's got to be very much business-led. And so it's really important that I think as people bid in and as we develop new programs, obviously the interesting question is, well, what businesses are going to take up these research outputs and innovations as a result of that? And I think the Strategic Priorities Fund is obviously thinking about the future businesses, because clearly they don't currently exist. So, and that's very much, I think, in our space about trying to think about the next generation of businesses for the UK to create future wealth and prosperity. There is also a Strength in Places fund. So Greg Clark has been particularly interested in kind of the productivity gap between the southeast and other parts of the country. A lot of that's perhaps been heightened by the Northern Powerhouse initiative, but there's now a new fund, 115 million for Strength in Places, and that's being largely developed between Research England and Innovate UK. Now, EPSRC and its council, and I think research councils, are committed to being a national funder with excellence at the heart of our decision making. So I think this will be more about sort of building probably infrastructure or capability in different parts of the UK. And as Phil Nelson, our current chief executive, would say, you know, he works on sound vibration, and he's based at the University of Southampton, and one of his key collaborators was Rolls-Royce, based in Derby, and so he, you know, in a country of this size, commuting to Derby from Southampton takes just under a couple of hours, and you know, the impact of that research creating jobs is not in Southampton, it's in the Midlands area. So clearly there is, you know, certainly for research councils, a strong belief that actually you don't necessarily have to have the businesses created where the science takes place. So there have been set 4 grand challenges. I think these are the first set of which we see some really strong potential where the UK perhaps has a leading edge, and so can sort of perhaps move quicker to market. So here we've got artificial intelligence, data-driven economy, clean growth, future mobility of an ageing society. So they are the current challenges that are being kind of developed in more detail. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some sector deals as well. So for EPSRC, you know, we're very supportive of the industrial strategy. We feel very well placed. So here's some facts and figures from our current portfolio without the industrial strategy kind of having any current impact. So our total portfolio of current grants and training is around 4.6 billion, of which 3.2 of that is relevant to industrial sectors. So a very strong percentage of our fundamental research that we support has direct relationships to either companies, or we see a real benefit for that for industry. When we were developing the last delivery plan, we did a lot of analysis. We were very fortunate that HEFCE worked with us to give us sight of the REF case impact studies that many universities put together. From the panel B REF impact case studies, the office did a lot of work analysing them, finding grants that were referenced in those case studies, and actually then looking at the impacts that were evidenced by the universities. And we've shown that over the REF period, assessment period, it showed £80 billion of economic activity at the cost of 7.8 billion investment from EPSRC over the same time frame. So a very kind of strong economic output from our fundamental research. So that's about £1 in 10, and I think that's a pretty good rate of return for our investments. We have 3,800 currently collaborating organisations, and our actual cash leverage in that portfolio is in excess of £1 billion. So a really strong message. So, you know, when we see the industrial strategy being sort of presented, you know, we shouldn't feel threatened by that at all. And I think that's all disciplines, and because I think some of the most impressive outcomes that were demonstrated were from the fundamental sciences, because if you think about the REF time frame that people had to actually show real kind of connectivity from the investment to the outcome, it actually pushed a lot of it back to fundamental science, because that's where you could get real traction over the time period. So as a result, so far from the current industrial strategy, this is kind of what we've managed to access from the funding, which will either be delivered through EPSRC or in partnership with EPSRC. So already we've secured additional allocations of another 250 million of research activity, which includes the new Faraday Challenge through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, some robotics and artificial intelligence in extreme environments, another 42 million, 500 additional doctoral places through the MPIF fund, and there are currently innovation fellowships that are being assessed. So, you know, that's just been in the short time that the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund has been announced so far. So, and that's really good. You know, is that of interest to the maths? I hope so, because I think a lot of this fundamental and investment in people is where I think maths can play very strongly. But equally, there's a kind of bit of a displacement factor, because if we're able to support the kind of, you know, business that we want to do in our portfolio, that hopefully puts less pressure on our existing baselines as well. And just a flavour, I mean, you can have these slides anyway, but this just shows you the different challenges that have come through the industrial strategy wave 1, and so you can probably, well, you can read those for yourself, but hopefully those kind of research areas don't feel alien to perhaps what mathematics can contribute towards. And wave 2, we've got, say, energy, food production, there's some creative industries, audience of the future, which I think is AHRC as well, as some healthy ageing, etc. So that's been one huge disruption to the Research Council landscape so far, but slightly before that curve, at the announcement of the last delivery plan was the additional funding for Global Challenges Research Fund, which has also provided an additional £15 million a year in the 4 years, and £10 million a year for EPSRC in the first year for additional research for global challenges. And now I think the UK and certainly EPSRC landscape wasn't particularly strong in securing funding in ODA territory. That's Official Overseas Development Assistance, something like that, the right acronym. So, you know, I think that's been a real, again, opportunity for EPSRC fundamental researchers to think about what research they can do that can meet the ODA criteria in some of the, you know, more deprived countries around the world, and so that's been a really kind of useful opportunity to get involved in. The first year, the 10 million due to timescales we gave out as institutional awards to our kind of key partners, but latterly there have been some calls around energy and diagnostics as well. So that's kind of the activity that's going on in that space. And I think Philippa, in her wisdom, has provided some funding for the CMS to support a workshop to think about, you know, how the mathematical sciences can contribute to that challenge. So I think we're interested to see the outcomes of that workshop. You know, there's no guarantees about what that might deliver in terms of funding going forward, but I think, you know, if we can get some strong steer from the community, we might be able to work with that to secure funding for you.
Can I just say that's happening at the end of February at ICMS, the joint activity with the Newton Institute, and I think some adverts and invitations are going out either today or tomorrow.
Good. Okay, so that's kind of the world that's changing, and in terms of a UK RI, or UK Research Innovation as we should more formally announce it, on day one you'll probably see very little change. You know, it's all about making sure our systems don't crash, all the assets that are owned by government are transferred from the 9 organisations into the new organisations. A lot of legal work going on, making sure IT work, so you can still email staff, and payments will still get paid not only to staff but also to institutions. So a lot of work going on to make sure systems transfer on the 1st of April. Then we'll be starting to enter into a period of what's called transformation. And so what's going to happen will be there'll be an early sort of delivery plan for UKRI coming out, and then I know already that the individual research council organisations have been asked to think about our next delivery plan to nest into that. and obviously support the work of UKRI. So there's going to be quite a lot of work going on behind the scenes. So I think, in the first instance there should be probably a little change. Your contacts will stay the same, research councils, we're coming together in quite an orderly fashion. But what the future holds is a mystery to all of us, I think. But we're all committed, I think, into making sure, as I say, that original mission statement, that we remain a strong research and innovation funding system. So the structure for EPSRC has again remained stable for quite a number of years. So mathematical sciences sits as one of our 4 capability programs, indicated by these kind of grey circles, and then we have a number of challenge themes around the outside, of which have been focused around delivering, I think, specific government requirements through successive spending reviews. I think most of them are still fit for purpose where we are now, in terms of energy, quantum, healthcare, digital, manufacturing. So, one doesn't see kind of any sense that that's going to be changing. But what we did try to do in our last delivery plan was to think very much about the audience, about trying to secure our funding is a very political one, and so we've kind of thought about what we do as a business, as a funding organisation, both in terms of our fundamental science in partnership with our business relations that I've already mentioned. And so we kind of put together a delivery plan that focused around 4 outcomes, and trying to basically say to the Minister, if you fund EPSRC, we can help deliver a more prosperous and productive nation, a more connected nation, a more resilient nation, and a more healthy nation. And showing the kind of richness of the different organisations that we collaborate with, relevant government departments that work in partnership with us, the different industry-led organisations, and our academic partners as well. And it went down really well, and I think also from a personal viewpoint, I think it's allowed, and I mentioned it over lunch, it's allowed researchers to be free of individual disciplines and how much money has my discipline got, and really thought about actually what can we contribute to this outcome, and so has led to, I think, some really healthy discussions. I know some themes have actually taken this as kind of a framework for actually encouraging network discussions between disciplines as well. So it's been a useful tool. It is a communication tool, and I think that's what my next slide says. It's very much to be that strategic expression about why invest in fundamental science. It's a long-term game, so actually as political cycles tend to run in 5 years now, sometimes a bit less, trying to give that continuity is really important. But it's not meant to tightly prescribe what your research activities to do, so we don't necessarily need to see a linear relationship between each grant that we get coming in and its direct kind of contribution to those outcomes that we've defined. And I think the next slide tries to show that. This was kind of penned by our chief executive when I came up with the concept, and then he drew what he felt was a representation. So this is trying to show that each of these circles is like a research grant, and there isn't necessarily a straight natural path to each outcome. Actually, sometimes the outcomes might divert left. It might add to a different piece of research, and the combining of those kind of research grants lead to the next kind of development in the understanding. But we have confidence that over a longer time period that each of these will lead to somewhere into our portfolio of being more productive, more resilient, more connected, and more healthy. So we do have a bit of structure, so there is kind of a positioning of allowing probably 60% of our portfolio to be completely driven by our academic research community, but nevertheless there are some research challenges and questions that are much closer to those outcomes, where we would actually set some problems, some calls which we'd expect the community to respond to, and so there are strategic priorities, and about 40% is invested in that kind of top-down approach. Now, Council were quite clear that that's a target. We shouldn't be dogmatic to it, you know. To reach that target, we shouldn't break the system by just kind of reaching that 60-40 split. And so you may have seen perhaps a few less calls in some of the more managed areas over the last sort of 18 months, and more facilitation perhaps by the office about encouraging communities to do that, which is very much, I think, the ethos of what the I&I is about. So it's letting the community think about its own problems. We can give you a bit of a framework to say, actually, these are things that we find important, we think kind of hits and resonates with government, but allows the community to say, okay, we take that problem and this is what needs to be done at the fundamental level to help sort of achieve that goal. So that's very much the kind of concept. So in terms of the strategies that EPSRC employs, you will be familiar probably with the balancing capabilities. So here is our kind of analysis of the portfolio through our portfolio managers, through theme leads, to actually understand where the landscape lies. And we've recently republished our strategies for the 111 areas in our research portfolio. Very much working with our advisory bodies in actually framing that. In terms of building leadership, this is supporting people. People are actually key to our research portfolio, right from early career PhD training all the way through to our senior professorial investments. So we've actually been thinking about that. So we're carrying on our investment of doctoral training partnerships at £92 million a year, which is an increase, I think, on the previous years. Lots of funding through industrial case, and also we've recently rescoped the first grant scheme to a new investigator award to make it more fit for purpose. And in terms of accelerating impact, we still encourage each research grant to think about its pathways to impact, but I think the things that we've probably done so far is the prosperity partnerships, and that's actually being a business lead problem being then kind of funded through a research academic institution, and we funded 11 of those, secured extra money from the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund from that, and lots of support from government on that approach. So 18 months, where have we got to? I've mentioned some of these already. I think we've done a lot of work on kind of establishing our outcomes framework with the community. And I've mentioned the new investigator awards scheme as well, and this is new business for us. We've spent a lot of time supporting and delivering new investments like institutes, almost like as a preferred delivery partner for government. And so these are the kind of additional activities that we've done as the Alan Turing Institute, which I'm sure you know well. There is the DCMS Cybersecurity and Internet of Things, the Sir Henry Royce Institute. I'm personally involved in Rosalind Franklin Institute, Cavendish Laboratories. So these kind of additional projects is kind of in their totality is an additional £900 million that EPSRC has been asked to deliver within our kind of existing resource envelope. So that's another reason why we're all quite stretched at the moment for activities. But a lot of that is about infrastructure for the community, which we then hope will deliver additional funding for the research community as a whole. International, well, with the arrival of the Global Challenges Research Fund, we've also kicked around at Council a couple of times, what should we be doing in the international space. Council, I think, because of our constrained resources and the number of people we have, it's quite a high overhead to do international collaborations, certainly for working with the other kind of funding agencies. So we've tended to keep a focus around key partners of US, Europe, China, India and Japan. But I think what we want to make sure the take-home message is that we encourage best with best. And I think there's been a new partnership fund that's just come out to allow researchers to form those collaborations with partners around the world. We're currently working to put in place lead agency agreements to make working between our two countries easier, so people don't suffer double jeopardy. But those negotiations can be quite long and drawn out. So with the NSF, you're not dealing with one organisation, you're dealing with many different parts, and so we've had to think about different negotiations with each of the different programme directors. So, but that's our commitment in terms of international. It's already been highlighted in terms of quality and diversity, a really kind of important issue. Mark Walpole is a real champion of improving equality diversity, and I think that's another key kind of target for UKRI going forward. There's already been an action plan that was launched by RCUK in 2016. A lot of it is about publishing data so people are more aware of perhaps some of the imbalances that exist. So certainly in EPSRC's landscape, it is about equality and perhaps gender issues. Some of the other research councils is not about gender issues, it's about kind of diversity issues. So we've all got sort of targets and actions prepared to take forward. Certainly we've been trying to get our own house in order to make sure our mechanisms, our calls, our peer review processes are fair and open. We've piloted some anonymous peer review. We've recently had an equality call to try and actually put some funds out, not to try, we will be putting some funds out at institutions to help institutions sort of get their houses in order in terms of improving the EDI agenda. So certainly that's, I mean, I don't think, you know, when we've looked at our processes, they are broken or they are unfair, but probably there are things that are unknown. So the fact that people can get childcare support if they come to sort of be on our prioritisation panels, and it's just that there's small family-friendly aspects to our portfolio that are there and can be accessed, but how well do we kind of make that available in terms of an openness for all? We've set targets of increasing the gender and diversity on our advisory groups. To be fair, ours aren't that bad. You know, we're in a pretty good place of around 30 to 40% on our advisory panels. So some of this I've mentioned. So the institutional sponsorship and the work we've done with universities to try and support that. We've done actually quite a lot of questionnaring with universities in my role to find out what mechanisms they have in place. And it's not just about whether they've got Athena Swan or Juno or whatever it might be. It's actually, well, what practices are they following in terms of supporting staff on EPSRC business. I've mentioned also the data monitoring that we do and the importance of getting case studies out there so people know what's acceptable and what we can do to support. The other thing that EPSRC staff have done, and all our panel chairs are undergoing in our advisory groups, is unconscious bias training as well. So actually we have a lot more awareness about you know, you can't remove biases, but actually how you behave and what's important to consider. So a lot of work's been going on, and I think we're making some strong progress, but it will take time. And of course one of the risks for us is that we don't overburden that small population that are currently very successful in our portfolio to sit on every committee and contribute every time we need to get the right balance on a panel. That you know, we keep asking a subset of individuals all the time. So important to get that balance right. And I think one of the other improvements I think over the last 12 months we've successfully achieved is we've had no single gender prioritisation panels in the last 12 months as a consequence of this as well. So good progress. Okay, so let's go to the next level down. So that's the kind of top level strategy for and delivery plan for EPSRC. Again, mentioned to David over lunch, I think going into UKRI we don't see any reason to deviate from that plan. It might require a slightly different language to make sure it dovetails into the UKRI delivery plan, but certainly we're very committed to this prosperity outcome approach, a balance between our bottom-up and top-down portfolio. And it's not unreasonable to expect there to be some sort of high-level challenges set by government as they are providing the funding that we support our researchers with. So I think the key message for that kind of part of the talk is you know, thinking about how as a community you can play into that agenda. It's not an exclusive agenda. Just because there's an Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund for the automotive industry, there isn't a preconceived group of people that funding's going for. It's trying to set the challenge. That's an area of strength for the UK in terms of industry, and I think what we want to think about is actually how do our fundamental researchers help solve the difficult problems that many of those industries face. So for maths, I've this is kind of Philippa's existing presentation. Whether Katie will adapt it, only time will tell. But currently, it's about maintaining those strong community-led research proposals coming forward. The importance of continuing to have good networks within the community. We mentioned about sort of mathematical science infrastructure, so we've got organisations like the INI and the ICMS being very kind of a key part of the funding landscape, but equally at all levels supporting programme grants and also fellowships, and I'll touch on some of that as well. So as a result of the balancing capability, this is the maths portfolio. It's around, from a research perspective, 196 million of current grants, normalised to take away any kind of duplication. These are the priority areas in terms of the size. You can get this from our visualising our portfolio off the website. You'll see the green here is the areas that mathematical sciences is continuing to grow, so strong support for statistics and applied probability and continuum mechanics. The gold areas are the maintain areas, so quite, I think, just looking at it pictorially, an even balance between those different research disciplines, and a reduction focus on complexity science. And so that's the current portfolio that maths supports. Looking at it from an institutional perspective, these are the different winners of the research grants that are provided by the Mathematical Sciences programme or theme. The colour coordination is to do with whether it's a framework institution, a strategic research institution, or another. But I hope, the larger blobs I hope don't surprise you. To me, the take-home message there is the diversity of maths across the whole of the university landscape. So there's good participation from lots of institutions. So I think it just shows you how pervasive our support is for this research around the UK. And this is research grants only. And just kind of reflecting, perhaps building on my previous kind of points that I've made about the importance maths has to play in the wider agenda. So this is all the classification that we do back in the office, and about the relevance to different sort of sectors that we kind of classify our portfolio. So yes, a large investment is kind of attributed to no sector relevance, and at the time of the application that's not necessarily a surprise, and this is taken of what's written down in the research proposal, not actually where it will eventually end up. But in terms of what is written down in research proposals, where there might be collaborations, whether it's in kind or a clear steer about the benefit that research has, a really good distribution, I think, of the different sectors that maths and mathematical sciences kind of feeds into. So I take great encouragement from seeing that kind of mix in the portfolio. So starting at the different career stages, at the early career stage, so maths again has been doing a lot of work in supporting early career researchers. That's not uncommon across the whole of EPSRC. In fact, we've had a couple of council discussions and we've been talking to fellows about what kind of support's needed, particularly in quite a sort of a difficult time when people are trying to establish themselves independently in a very kind of tough competitive funding environment. And so maths has taken the decision to put this forum together, I guess, to bring like-minded individuals together for mutual support, to help educate them about different funding mechanisms, and to enable those networks to grow around the UK. So I think you can see Derek Craig, before he moved roles, facilitating some of the youngsters there. And so there are continuing outcomes or outputs so far from that group, and I think a lot of it's about conversations and good conversations, and not being, I think, scared that the funding council system is some great unknown. Actually, we are probably our own worst enemies, that we want to help people more than the time allows, really. And if people have got questions, we're more than happy to meet and support them and point them in the right direction of opportunities that might fit their needs, even if we haven't got a current call that's available. And of course, for us, it's embedding quite early on that actually a research career now is not just about your own ideas, but how it fits into the funding landscape, and the many opportunities that exist not only for research councils but from Europe and perhaps from working with business that they can get support for their research going forward. So moving into fellowship sort of territory, we still continue to have priorities around specific parts of our portfolio. So in mathematical sciences, there is support for fellowships in statistics and applied probability, and again, I think that's kind of mirroring the kind of the desire to grow that part of the portfolio. And Sophia was mentioning over lunch about recent interviews and actually a strong kind of field of researchers coming forward for posts, and hopefully that's because of the kind of capability we've been thinking about over the last kind of decade or so. So yeah, I won't read them out, you can read them for yourself, but just a note from the office when we tend to have the prioritisation panels for fellowships if people are thinking about their investments or their applications. So mathematical sciences isn't just an EPSRC thing, so this is looking more across council. So here you've got our investment, so this is a slightly higher figure because I think it includes training in this graph, and you'll see 54 million also comes in from other research million, yes, it is million. And this breaks down to the different research councils, so a good distribution amongst the many different research councils. So you've got BBSRC, ESRC as you go around the pie chart, strong kind of interconnections with MRC, NERC, and I think that just kind of represents the different sort of data models and sort of statistical sets that are needed in some of the big kind of problems and challenges dealt with by the other research councils. So it's really good to see, the extent to which mathematical sciences reaches and actually secures funding beyond EPSRC. So there's another kind of overview of the current landscape. So in interdisciplinary research, I've already mentioned that it's kind of I think a key sort of challenge, I think, for Paul Nurse's review, but I would hasten to or hedge my bets that interdisciplinarity is for big challenges. But at the grant level, at the working level, your best bet is to go through the Remit Query portal that we have on our website if you're unsure about whether your proposal should be led by EPSRC or another research council, or whether it's mathematical sciences or more likely to be led by another theme within EPSRC, and so we can help give you a steer. It's also really helpful to us because I think if something comes in flagged as interdisciplinary, we're already alert to thinking about, actually this is a bit different, so we might need to think more carefully about the peer review of this particular proposal. So that's certainly something that you can use to help your proposal going through the system. And here's just again a list of, I think, some of the other activities that mathematical sciences has been undertaking to get that interdisciplinary reach. So for me, who's not an expert in mathematical sciences, I see lots of ticks of the kinds of behaviours that this kind of indicates that people are participating in. And I think a real desire is actually how do we make this more led by the community rather than being kind of encouraged strongly from the centre, from EPSRC. And again, I just put this graph up again, or this figure up again, just to kind of bring that kind of story back together again, that you see that interdisciplinarity, you see the different kind of reaches that the portfolio has, you see the different kind of sectors that mathematical sciences can contribute to, and I think it still doesn't change the result that we see that coming from this two-pronged approach of bottom-up and top-down. So I think it works well, and just encourage people to think about their research in that context. Okay, so we mentioned research infrastructure. So another part of the research infrastructure for mathematical sciences is the Alan Turing Institute. So really just some highlights. You probably read on Monday, I think, Sir Adrian Smith has been announced as the new director for the Institute. That's really good news. We know Adrian very well in the Research Council system. I hope that's highly respected in terms of the community. We've also seen the addition of Birmingham and Exeter, who have recently joined as partners of the Alan Turing Institute, so that builds on top of already extending the membership to Leeds, Manchester, Newcastle and Queen Mary, on top of the founder partners. So again, I think it's just showing as an institute, it's got that national presence, which is very much how it was conceived. You can read for yourself, if you don't know them, the priorities. They're quite well detailed on the website, and there's the web link there. But the particular sort of current opportunities, this Turing enrichment scheme to actually aimed at the postgraduate portfolio to get experiences of 3, 6 or 12 months working with that institute and getting different experiences. So if that's something that's of relevance, I just kind of commend that to you. So a really important part of the portfolio for us. So Centre for Doctoral Training. I never know how this might be received in terms of the mathematical sciences community, but we're very kind of positive about the support that we put out for doctoral training. We're still the largest research council funder of postgraduate training. We have these different kind of modes of support. There's the doctoral training partnerships and the Centre for Doctoral Training, which is the kind of lion's share of our support. We also, as I mentioned earlier, 17 million a year on industrial case, and we are trialling, based on feedback from the community, doctoral studentships on strategic research investments. And so this is kind of, where if you've got a programme grant or a large investment, where actually that research challenge or problem might allow a good opportunity for a PhD student to actually work alongside that a problem. We're trialling that, and that's on Prosperity Partnerships on the second call that we're currently sort of testing that out. And really the key principle for this and how far it extends is to make sure that the student is not on the critical path of success of the research proposal, because actually that's not fair, because actually students should be generating their own independent research. That's part of the PhD process. And so I think Council are quite clear about the distinction about how far or how close studentship should be aligned to existing research grants. So the doctoral training call that I'm just about to mention, we currently have 115 centres out there with 1,100 participating companies in 33 universities. Just recently gone through the midterm review, which very positive, panel very impressed with what they saw. 90% operating at or above what we expected in terms of that stage of the process, bearing in mind that these are only kind of 3 years old for some of the newer centres. So we are pretty confident about recommissioning for the next round of centres. We hope to support a similar number. We can't guarantee it'll be exactly the same number, because partly that depends on the cost of the proposals coming in and what kind of gearing those centres actually propose as part of their submissions. But we've got a similar amount of money to invest. The call's now live. It went live last Wednesday. We've done a lot of work with our advisory panels and council to get to the call where it is. The announcements for the decisions we made late autumn, so that hopefully will give good time for recruiting new students for October 2019. So what the panel, the advisory groups have been signing off the priority area approaches, and there are 30. There are 4 directly relevant to mathematical sciences, but there are some others as well that will be, I think, of important interest. We've been thinking about the assessment criteria and what we will do at the outline stage and at the full stage. We've been looking at leverage and engagement models, because I think that's slightly different to what we asked last time, and now there's a requirement for institutions to underwrite the leverage that they promise in their proposals, and also we've been looking at demand management approaches to try and keep the number of proposals manageable that we get through the system. There's also an open strand as well, which is different this call. So there are about 70% of the portfolio will go through those 30 priority areas that have been identified, but 30% of the investment is allowed for proposals that fit outside those priority areas. And the importance or the message for there is, you know, we hold our hands up and we may not have thought of every good centre that needs to exist. And I think part of the requirement for making a good CDT is for any proposer to think about why there is a necessity for a CDT to exist in the first place. And so there's an opportunity there for people to make the case for what we've not thought of. Now, I think we've gone through quite a thorough process, and that 70-30 is not, again, a drop-dead figure in terms of what we will or won't support. But I think it's just trying to encourage the community to think, you know, if there is something as a community or between disciplines that you think actually is really, really important and you're surprised why it's not in our portfolio, then I think that's the conversation to have at the outline stage, and that will be welcomed by EPSRC. The other thing that's also kind of hot off the press is that this will probably be one of the first or one of the largest investments that UKRI will make in its first year of business. And so appropriately we went and kind of shared this with our Research Council colleagues. Phil wrote personally to Mark Woolport to say this is what we're doing, this is the process we've undergone to make sure we've got the priorities right. And whilst nothing's changing from what EPSRC is doing, what it has facilitated is, again, conversations between different councils and Innovate UK as well. So hopefully that might provide more opportunities for cross-council support. And lastly, just to finish on kind of, it's not a linear process, but part of the process that probably does come at the end point about how you take the knowledge from the funding that we support and the people that we support into the environment more widely, whether that's actually informing other disciplines or whether that's into business. And so there is currently a review of knowledge exchange in the mathematical sciences. The scope of the review is highlighted here about what successful knowledge exchange looks like, what it doesn't look like, what mechanisms are out there to support it, enhance it, you know, what's it mean for people's career, you know, do people feel they're sacrificing their career if they get involved in knowledge exchange activities, how can you kind of maintain those relationships, and actually how do we make sure people get that it's come from pure maths, particularly I guess personally if there's been a long gestation period from the fundamental thinking and the actual kind of impact. So we've got a very eminent panel, and then the mug shots. I think David, you've got tie on there, David, looking very smart. And it's chaired by Philip Bond, and where we are in the process, I should just say there's also been a review committee with a much broader membership, and this gives a representation of the different organisations. So you can see not only universities, government departments, GCHQ, as well as some companies as well. So good representation, I think, from some of the receivers of knowledge. There has been a survey process where there's 350 kind of experiences, work come in. There's been some case studies developed. There was call for evidence, and that was more at an institutional level, and some workshops as well to try and actually talk to you who kind of generate the research outputs to think about what knowledge exchange could look like or should look like, and this is where we are in the process. So there was a review board meeting looking at the draft report in December, and it's currently being refined based on feedback, and that will be launched at the House of Lords in April. Is that right? Okay, I'm on message.
I think it's the 26th of April.
26th of April.
I'm not sure it's plus or minus a day.
So just coming into land, who's who. So you've had some introductions. So Katie has taken on the mantle of the mathematical sciences theme. Very able individual, has worked with EPSRC a number of years. And so it's great to have Katie on board taking this role. There's been quite a lot of change in the team, portfolio managers which you may or may not have experienced in terms of your day-to-day working. There's nothing sinister about that. We have bright young people who are very career-minded, and there have been quite a lot of opportunities to either get promoted or to work in UKRI type projects over the last 18 months, and some people obviously have found other career opportunities outside the Research Council. So this is the current set, and you're currently fully staffed. Oh, do you? Oh, sure. Portfolio managers are currently fully staffed, touch wood. And we've got Pat and Beverly and Val who support the work in the back office. So if you've got any questions, I think that's your who's who guide to go to. And as I said earlier, you know, they might not thank me, but they always welcome kind of a call or a chat if you've got any kind of feedback or you've got any questions about your proposals or what time might benefit your submission. And it's a joint effort. You know, I spend a lot of my time as part of my role of the delivery plan, getting evidence, looking at success rates, looking at kind of what we can't support. So we get lots of research ideas in, and it's not about success rates, it's actually understanding the capacity of the portfolio and going back to government and BEIS and actually making the case for why we should be supporting fundamental science. So I'm absolutely with Phil and the rest of the senior management team on your side to try and secure additional funding for research and for training and people, but it is a team effort. You may hear about team science in terms of institutions, and so anything that you can do to support us, and I guess looking at the big institutions like INI, CMS, etc., to make that case politically is really important. But I think equally in your institutions, ensuring that maths is seen as a vital part of the ecosystem of science and innovation, to help us make the case for science and to keep it on the radar of policymakers, of investment. So I think we are benefiting very strongly at the moment from the creation of UKRI, but we need to make sure that doesn't become a fashion because it's new and because of the current political environment. You know, we know there'll be a Brexit, we know there'll be a general election, and we know that ministers will change. We've got a new minister to brief at the moment. So it's a continued pressure to make sure that we make the case jointly. So I just ask you to help support us, as well as give us valuable criticism and critique as we move forward. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm aware that time is moving on, so and Andrew is going to be here for the wine reception. So if people have questions they want to follow up with, I'm sure he's very happy to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a couple of brief questions.
But does anyone have a quick burning question that they would like to?
So we had some experience in the past. I can show two cases where basically when asking for what would be the best leading one, EPSRC was saying it should be BBSRC, and BBSRC was saying it should be EPSRC. I was wondering if UKRI would be an opportunity to have actually an overarching place to inquire what would be the best one, rather than the individual one saying it should be someone else.
Yeah, it's difficult to work out, I think, at the moment about how much they'll get involved in the details. So I think there is an absolute commitment, and certainly probably a stronger commitment between CEOs that I've ever seen about kind of making it kind of all joined up and to make that more efficient. I guess, you know, what we can't afford, because we don't want to actually overstaff another group of people when resources are so kind of pressed to sort of build up another new central team to look at interdisciplinary research. So I think there will be a lot of scrutiny and desire to make sure that is improved. You know, but at the moment I think it is cascaded down to the working level, who usually know where it's best. And I wonder sometimes whether the decision is such that, you know, when we currently have quite I think defined remits, you know, and I think part of the challenge, and I won't use a mathematical sciences example, I'll use one that perhaps comes between STFC and EPSRC, just to kind of desensitise it, but it's sometimes quite difficult as an organisation when we've all got pressured budgets, and if you think about the shaping capability and the portfolio that we've put around what we might want to grow or reduce or increase, and somebody comes up with a proposal and you think, well, actually we might say that's going to be reduced, you know, it sits what we think is outside our portfolio and it goes to another research council, but if they have no portfolio or call open in that particular area, you can sense the frustration of the applicant thinking, well, I can't go there because you tell me it's not part of your portfolio, but there's no opportunity currently in this other research council to invest it, you know, to submit it. So there is that kind of almost like point of principle where, you know, what should we do when we've got constrained resources and somebody's saying it's not important to our portfolio and somebody's saying, well, it is part of the portfolio but there is no open opportunity, how do you handle it? But at the moment we don't have a bottomless pit to support everything else that doesn't fall into other people's remits. So it's a challenge, and I guess it's hard for an individual case because you just have to keep pushing back to say, well, actually I've got a really strong idea, you know, it's got to have at least, you know, a peer review opportunity. What's the best way to do that? And maybe that's escalating it up from beyond the theme, but I think Philippa and colleagues are usually quite pragmatic. I don't think we go out of our way to really annoy people. It's sometimes kind of how we're set up, and maybe that's what UKRI will hopefully smooth out.
Because I understood that UKRI, the idea would be to make the councils less of islands and to make it more interconnected. So what are the mechanisms they foresee to help encouraging this?
So I think it will be, it's probably streamlining our approaches, and I can't say what may or may not approach, but so EPSLC has our strategic priorities, but we still have responsive mode for the majority of our portfolio where people can put in a proposal anytime, and even in a reduced area we still allow proposals coming in. It just might be more competitive for those individuals coming through. But in all research councils or funders, and I think Innovate UK traditionally used to have closed calls and no other avenues, and so one of the things that you could say, well, Innovate has aligned perhaps with research councils is they now have an open fund so they can receive proposals. So I think you'll see more of kind of alignment of kind of approaches rather than perhaps kind of redefining remit interfaces, because once you do that you could say, well, at least if each council has an open strand, there is no gap for it to fall down, it just has to come in through that open kind of strand rather than a strategic priority. So I think that's the kind of thing UKRI will be looking at. But the principle, and it's in the bill, which is quite important to all of us, is this kind of principle of subsidiarity. So it's not about setting up new mechanisms, it's about using existing mechanisms to deliver the portfolio. So that's why you will probably not see a new central kind of scheme set up within UKRI being delivered by a whole new set of staff, because actually they'll still need the kind of domain expertise of the individual research councils to peer review it. So it will be get the process right and devolve it back down to the research council. So I think that's what UKRI will be looking more at, about how to close the gaps and use existing councils more consistently.
I think we ought to move on. So thank you, Andrew. Again.
Okay.